There's April.
No, here's Mike. We want to welcome you guys today to a Live United event. This is supposed to be a comfortable and casual conversation about artificial intelligence. And Mike Weiss is on the team that's putting together all of Live United stuff, and I would just fall apart without the team. So if you want to know about more events, you can use your phone on my back. There's a website. We have another event next Friday. We actually have 2 more events in February, and then a March 1st event, and a big showcase April 9th. So we hope to see you at more events. And of course, there'll be lots of more emails and advertising. But we have some really interesting questions and provocative conversations. So we're excited to have you here. And so welcome, Dr. Weiss.
Yay. Hi. I've been in business for a long time. I started in marketing. That word itself creates pictures in your head, right? Some good, maybe some not so good. I started in marketing when the definition was primarily, how do we figure out how to get people to buy things? And as a Christian, I had a problem with that. And so the literature shifted so that now it's been empirically demonstrated that that mentality of marketing does not lead to the best business results. That a mentality of marketing that says that what we need to do is align ourselves with a customer that we can best meet their need, adapt with them over time, be customer-centric, and then meet that need with integrity, allowing them to have a relationship which is advantageous and win-win. Now that philosophically felt better for me. And so when the empirical research came out that suggested that that leads to greater profitability in the long run, it's kind of like validation, you know. So I started out learning about data through market research, where we would take people's intentions to buy and their expressions of what they hope to do, and then hopefully that would inform how we were going to communicate and interact with them and serve them. Does that make sense? Is there any problem with that? Any problem with asking people on surveys what they think they might do in the future, or what they like, what they don't like? Any issues?
Well, what do you do with the data?
Elaborate, Mike.
Well, you could find out a bunch of information about people and use it for a specific purpose, or you could sell that data and have other people use it for purposes that it's never intended.
That can definitely happen. And when I ask survey questions, so how much do you like Point Loma Nazarene University? Agree, disagree, on a Likert scale. Does that really get at the core behavior or somebody's intentions and attitudes and impressions? Doesn't really get at what. I can develop predictive models to try to predict based upon their intentions what they're likely to do. But I can tell you sometimes those R-squares in a regression model or structural equation model is not very good, because sometimes a person's intention does not align with what they actually do. You following me? So then we got into data that's being collected on us all the time. All the time. Every moment. Every click, every ask Alexa to find or Alexa to do. And that data then goes up to the cloud, doesn't it? And so instead of just asking people what they think they might do or what they feel or what their attitudes are, do we now have their actual behavior recorded? And can that actual behavior inform the marketer to try to find out the uniqueness of every individual, and then maybe hopefully design things that are uniquely for you? You follow me? Now, what if we move into the next realm where that data that is being collected not only predicts but informs our next behavior? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Should Christians be involved in it, or should Christians run from it? So that's what I want to talk about today, okay? Because I'm standing at a new wave. I mean, I've survived quantitative research and qualitative research methods, and I've survived data analytics, and I've survived the internet. And now, if I look at all the marketing literature, they say the next great revolutionary paradigm shift will be the use of AI. And it suggests that most firms want to do it, but don't know how to do it yet, or don't have the sophistication to do it because it takes a different level of sophistication. You have countries like China who are very much into this, because what advantage does China have over the United States? What? Workforce. Yeah, population, right? So the population of China is much larger than the United States, and is this a device that they use all day long? And so is big data being collected on them all the time? And do they have as much of an issue in terms of their culture as the United States does about privacy? No. It's not as big of a deal there, right? I mean, I talk to my Chinese students, and that it doesn't scare them like it seems to scare some Americans, that everything that's being done is going up and becoming part of big data. And then that big data can be used in artificial intelligence to analyze, predict, align with, and maybe do it for you. Actually replace your doing something. So we stand at the precipice of a great unknown. We don't know if this is going to make us or break us. We don't know if this is going to help or hurt. But as a Christian, should I be talking about this? Should I be thinking about this? And as a Christian, if I decide it's scary and wrong, I could run from it, or maybe I should run toward it. Maybe my voice needs to be heard in the places where they're deciding what to use it for and how to use it and how not to use it. Should my Christian voice be around the table? Okay? So, I want to talk about it. And on the handout I gave you, I defined some terms. Basic artificial intelligence. We've got some people in the room who have more experience at this than I do. I'm a practitioner trying to figure out what this will look like and how I use it in the future. Fair enough? So this is why I want to learn from you. But any technique that enables computers to mimic human behavior. There's projections now that by the year 2035, 40% of the jobs will be replaced by artificial intelligence. Now that sounds really scary, but as the internet and did robotics, which also AI is part of that, have other things in the past replace a lot of jobs, and have new jobs been created because of it. So do we know if there's going to be first of all, it's right. It might create more than that, than it deletes. We don't know. We're there at that precipice. We don't know what that future holds. Mimic human behavior. It's defined as systems' ability to correctly interpret external data, to learn from the data, and to use those learnings to achieve specific goals and tasks through flexible adaptations. An example. Think resumes will be the way that companies pick you in the future? If you say yes, why do you think resumes will continue to be the standard for the future? Fact-checking, okay? So we'll submit a resume and then they'll use that to see whether or not we have integrity for telling the truth. Good, that's great insight. Some of you are suspicious that maybe resumes won't be the sole tool?
I'm suspicious.
What makes you suspicious?
It's such a flat, two-dimensional, and I feel like there's going to be other ways for people to learn about me. There's social media. I can imagine little image, video where I'm talking my resume. I mean, I don't know. I just seem so
Cool.
doesn't align. It doesn't
Other
feel
thoughts?
align with.
Yeah.
I mean, the resume is already computerized and analyzed by
Yes.
thousands of lines of code
Yes.
before a human even sees it.
Yes.
If you look at the resume analyzing software, almost everybody uses it,
Yes.
at least large companies, and it's much less face-to-face already.
Yes.
So,
Important insight. Resumes are already digitally analyzed. They're looking at keywords aligned to job descriptions. And so they're looking at whether or not your pronouncements about who you are align with what they think they need. And so they are measured. They're quantifiably measured. So that's already happening. But go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's some, and I haven't worked with these specific groups, but I know there's less than scrupulous recruiters who will use industrial espionage
Yeah.
and digital scanning to try to profile people so that they can find people who are not even looking for jobs, but who can fill requirements and who are underpaid. And so we all have this digital footprint, as the term goes. And that information is available either through legal or illegal means, and we see that as a means for seeking certain talent.
There's an article I could send you that talks about how some companies are using AI to ask you a series of questions to determine how hungry you are, what your grit level is. I don't mean hunger in terms of your eating, but how much you desire this. And they're actually building, based upon data that they know about you, projections of how likely you are to be hungry enough, gritty enough to persist in certain jobs. Supplementing the resume, there's other tools in AI that are being used right now that will ask you more behavioral questions and then create a profile of your fit to that company. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the last job I had, the resume was automatically analyzed, and then it approves whether or not you get sent to the next level, which was a web-based interview. And that's another complete personality kind of test thing before they even give you a real interview.
So they take your data and they project whether or not you'll fit and be effective in that environment. Which means, could firms with the best intentions, looking for the best people to contribute, can they find better fits than maybe traditional resumes? But could unscrupulous players in the market use it to find people who maybe are not, there's evidences that that we can predict that they're going to fit by a characteristic that is not desirable in society, but desirable for that firm. You follow that? Okay? Are you beginning to see the need for people and players to be in those places to make decisions that inform and guide it appropriately? Randy?
Yeah, I think that the resume is an interesting example because I think the term resume, whether or not it's obsolete, I think the whole process changed. The shift where you are seeking companies it could be a situation where through profiling, through intelligence, machine learning, that the whole transaction, the whole model flips. Whereas, companies recruit you, disintermediate recruiters, things like that, but they build a dossier. Dossier may be a better word than resume on you, and then they start selecting and targeting you. So the shift where you're applying or you're sending resumes, the ownership for the most part is on you, but could it flip where it's completely the opposite? The whole transaction flows differently.
LinkedIn is already testing AI models to do just that.
Yep.
Okay? Yep. So they will identify from people who are on LinkedIn, from data in LinkedIn and other sources, because can they buy and get data from other sources? They can get a lot of data on us to identify people that they're going to recruit.
One of the phrases I try to teach students is, if it's free, you're the product.
Mm-hmm.
You're the And so as we put more and more information out there about ourselves or sign up for these services and provide, release some of our privacy rights, then they're using that information. They got to make money somewhere. So there's a model in there.
In Europe, there is a new requirement for privacy disclosure that Google just got fined $57 million, which for not having the appropriate disclosures and the appropriate permissions. $57 million. Did that hurt Google much? Pennies. 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 It's actually the 4th time they've been fined relative to this particular law. Okay? And they say they're trying to comply and there's ambiguity, but see how this data is extremely valuable. Extremely valuable. Okay, so you got artificial intelligence, and then you got machine learning, which is kind of inside of there. Anybody know what machine learning is? What's machine learning? Go ahead, AJ.
Machine learning is basically the process where it learns by doing things over and over and over and over again, right? So like it'll just like go through the data, like and play a game a million different times and slowly get better, like you're playing chess.
So it improves. It improves with experiences, doesn't it? Good. Any other insights? And so, yeah.
And have you seen that documentary? It's super boring,
No, I've not.
but it's about Google's developing a machine learning algorithm that plays the world's best Go player. And he just smashes it. And the fascinating thing at the end of the documentary that you see is it does such an interesting move that people question, because it's so smart, is it more creative?
Yeah. So are you familiar with Watson, IBM's Watson? And so can Watson beat the best chess players?
Yes.
Can Watson win Jeopardy?
Yes.
So it accesses all this information, because information can be, it can be written, can't it? It could be scanned and then analyzed. It could be observed. It could be numerical. It could be alphanumerical. And so this directory of information we used to go to the library for is now available, and Watson was able to scan it so quickly. So what you need to have in order to have machine learning is you have to have a lot of numbers. You have to have a large enough data set with enough iterations that the math begins to predict based upon the prior experiences. That's why in China, with the large number of people where there's a lot of data, that gives them a competitive advantage at developing AI, because you need a lot of data, you need a lot of computing power to be able to very quickly make those assessments, which is the next one, deep learning, that begins to develop those if-thens. Okay, so we have input, and then we have, if this happens, this. And so you go through inputs and layers of inputs to be able then to move to the next step, where you're able to make those projections and to be able to define what's going to happen or shape what's going to happen. AJ, what'd you say?
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure on this from my research, and it's a tough question to answer, but it seems like with like AlphaZero, the documentary with Google, some of the deep learning, they've actually got an AI that can bypass that necessity for data, because through neural networks, it can play against itself, and essentially, even if you have no data, it can give itself its own data set and generate through playing itself and teach itself without any external data source. Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
It teaches itself, but I think you still need to have iterations, because what a neurosystem does is it creates a probability, a weighted factor for the number, and then it has to have those iterations in order to test whether or not that produces the right outcome. Okay. So anybody know more about that than I do?
Yeah, so I actually watched another documentary on Elon Musk's self-learning AI that actually would play in a game, like essentially against itself. So kind of like that, but the game is essentially the data input, so it keeps running the game against itself. And ultimately, the professional players of this game were bidding for time with it because of how good it was. They wanted to learn from it's evident that all.
So it's feeding off itself, but it's building a model on probabilities that's increasing the probability of being correct. Yeah. Does that make sense? Is that right? Those of you, go ahead, help me here.
Well, I don't
Okay, it's kind of scary, isn't it? Or fun, or interesting. Or scary? Or interesting?
It seems more to me like, what's the upside? The downside seems so obvious, I guess, but the upside is what? I think that's more of
From a business perspective, it is projected, and we don't know. It is projected, though, that this is going to increase profitability of firms in 15 years about 38%. Now, how would it increase the profitability of firms? It makes them more efficient. It does. How else does it help firms?
Is it marketing specifically to me?
It
I mean, it already is.
Yeah, so it increasingly allows you to have what you want, when you want it, where you want it, for your need to be fulfilled before you even express it, so that when you're at home and you're talking to Alexa, does it have the capability to get to know you really well? And does that information then maybe even predict with sensors in the house when you need to buy certain things? Now, the scary thing is, who do you buy it from? And if it's an Alexa, who ends up supplying that need? Amazon does. So does it increase the probability that we'll meet your need, or does it decrease your choices so that the machine is beginning to dictate to you? Yes. It does. It does both of those things. And so, I'm sorry? Yes, you do. You have some choices there. So you see where monopoly would be a problem.
Talking about the market share of like trying to propose a product to somebody and the efficiency in which is that what you're
I'm saying that if I'm using Alexa and Alexa gets to know me and Alexa makes a recommendation for what I need to buy, is it likely that it will be supplied through Amazon or through some other source? It'll be Amazon. For example, Google. When you do a Google search right now, do you notice the ads that are on the top of the page? And there's suspicion that those tend to be Google partners where Google benefits from that. So are the algorithms leading you to choices that are in your best interest or the company's best interest? But it does make it more efficient. It does theoretically improve our ability to meet a customer's need. What is another way that it helps the business? Potentially up to 38% profitability, sir?
You can start cutting like the fat from the business, like certain employees or certain services, like customer service. It could be all through online based, depending on how efficient the AI is to be able to respond to every single question and maintain the conversation with the clients.
So we can maybe know where our inefficiencies are, and we can project in the future if a particular strategy is likely to produce a result that we want. And if it's not, then don't employ it. If it does, employ it. Okay, what else?
So, I mean, the big three I have is monetization of data. So especially, that's actually a big potential downside too, because it'll give a bigger advantage to big companies with data over smaller. The automation effect that I think we've already talked about a lot with stuff. And then I think a good way to conceive the customer stuff is the time to market. How quickly it can respond to customer changes when you have all this automation allows you to churn out products that are address the customer needs far faster. So time to market becomes a huge market advantage.
Product development is streamlined because of this. Yeah. What's another big savings? Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I think the umbrella of efficiency covers every aspect of every business. So logistics, supply chain, marketing, target segmentation. Just on the supply chain alone, knowing where to have that product placed, knowing how much of that product to have. Forget the targeting customers or marketing. Just that inventory is dead dollars in most organizations. Changing that alone is enough motivator on its own merit to start adapting or adopting those technologies. The efficiency, absenteeism, quality. Quality is probably one of the biggest areas for any product that you go out. And it's going to be interesting, but it applies to every aspect. HR, logistics, finance, every aspect I think it'll just bleed through entire organizations. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the manipulation of consumers or whatever.
I mean, for a business, this is extremely desirable. extremely desirable.
So the argument I've heard for why consumers should be happy about this kind of thing is that we're going to get targeted ads for the things we already want.
Personalized, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'm wondering if that's legit. Are there true, real benefits to us, the end user, if you will, or are the benefits really only for the businesses themselves?
I appreciate Amazon because Amazon has gotten to know me where they do make relevant recommendations. They do make product assortments available to me that are available in a very short period of time. So convenience is enhanced. Because of their efficiency, the price point is relatively low. It's enhanced competition. A few years ago, Walmart seemed invincible. And I had a Walmart executive in a class once. He had just retired from Walmart. And I said, well, where do you shop? And he goes, I shop at Amazon. I go, why? He goes, Amazon is freaking Walmart out. I mean, literally 5 years before that point in time, Walmart felt invincible. But because of innovation and because of these tools, a new competitor came into the marketplace that's provided everything you want, whenever you want, at your doorstep, cheaper than before, and soon by a drone in a half hour.
20 years ago, Sears felt invincible.
Sears felt invincible, and yeah, bad year for Sears. We'll see if they make it through another year. Now they had $4.7 billion injection, and I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think they're going to make it. Yeah, go ahead.
So to your initial question, I almost feel like more than cutting fat, AI, I mean, I don't mean to get ahead of you, but it seems like AI not only cut the fat from what may be inefficient in the company, but eliminating jobs altogether. And that might just be like a fear-based realization, like Tesla's semis that drive themselves. That just seems like a potential market that's just going to completely eradicate a whole workforce, even though people still need to be in the car by law. It seems like, is technology creating communism?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to the communism one yet because I'm going to one of the big savings are human beings, unpredictable, quality's not necessarily consistent. Do they call in sick? But if you have a truck driver, that's a tough job. And you can replace the truck driver. Right now you have to have somebody in the cab, but will you eventually? Once we trust these systems, will you need a person there?
You won't have to sleep at night.
Yeah, they just keep driving. And so the trucking industry is likely to be completely revolutionized by AI, okay? And truck drivers may cease to exist, as might owning your own car.
So I think the biggest question here, because it's pretty obvious that AI is going to replace a ton of jobs. Yes, it will create new ones, but overall, it's, if you think of it as like a rising tide of intellectual, need and like the level of processing to do it, it's rising the ocean of jobs from the base level, but no matter what way you cut it, the ground is getting smaller and smaller. The number of tasks that humans can perform is getting smaller. So no matter what, the net effect is going to be taking away jobs. But the bigger question, I think the really important social question is, if we're essentially making it way easier for human beings to do high-level cognition tasks, it seems like it's a net benefit as long as the benefits are shared equally. So it really turns into a social question when you say, are we essentially wiping out all these jobs, but then hyper-concentrating wealth into the owners of these AI companies? Or if we find a new model where we're starting to share these with all the people that are losing jobs, it could actually be a net benefit. So it seems like it's becoming more and more a question of social governance than just a question about net benefit. Because AI is overall beneficial in a world where all those benefits are shared equally, but in a world where it's concentrated in owners, it seems like it's really going to hurt millions.
So you buy the premise it can lead to communism?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be communism. It just has to be some way of enabling those who are, losing out on their jobs.
Might it lead to the situation that Karl Marx argued should lead to communism in its ideal state? Bourgeoisie and the proliferation.
Profit sharing
bourgeoisie and the, what's the other word? Bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to see some of the benefits, I've listed some here in a source where you can kind of get an idea of some of the benefits. And I was groping a little bit for employees, because employees, if we can cut number of employees, especially with fringe benefits, we can increase the predictability of being able to deliver things on time, in quality, efficiently, through technology. Is that a compelling argument for businesses to move to AI? It is. It is a compelling argument.
As, like I've heard many arguments of this whole idea, we move minimum wage up to the price point to where it's now cheaper to replace those jobs with AI-based devices rather than just continuing to hire people.
And firms do the benefit cost analysis to determine at what point is it advantageous to invest in the technology to do AI versus pay people minimum wage for those same tasks, given the externalities of those people. But it raises the question, if the skill set to live in a post-AI world is different than the skill set that a lot of people have, and if those people are able to be trained, that's great, but not everybody's going to be willing or able to be trained for those types of jobs, because we're moving into statistics, folks. This is statistics. Will we create those who have and those who have not? Those that are employable and those that are less employable. Plus the issue of who owns the data. The data is, in this scenario, extremely valuable. And so does that lead to power bases that are dangerous? Now, I'm sounding negative here. I generally think that innovation in technology has advanced society. And I'm thinking of what it does in the medical realm. What this does in the medical realm to be able to predict illness and to be able to increase the probability of illness being resolved. I mean, it's enormously beneficial there. It's enormous. So I, kind of go down the negative route. I wanted to balance it out a little bit too, on the positive. Yeah.
Kind of going back to their points, but the positive aspect, depending on who owns or how it's distributed, the AI could also facilitate the accessibility of education, like making it easier for anybody to interact with AI as a teacher and not having to, for example, places in Africa or South America, we have to walk miles in order to reach the school in order to learn. We have a little device, the AI can be your teacher and you can learn through that.
So technology and AI has the potential to democratize, to make available, to reduce those divisions. I mean, hasn't the internet done that? Where we now have access to information we never would have had before unless we had access to a library, so only a few people had that, and now almost everybody could get answers to their questions. And as they're searching, though, we're creating information that gives AI the potential to then serve them. And you mentioned higher education. There were 3 different forms of AI that I put on the handout: analytical AI, human-inspired AI, and humanized AI. And you mentioned universities. So right now we're more in the analytical AI stage. So where virtual teaching assistants are able to answer student questions and tailor reactions to individual data. So have you ever gone online with a company and a chat box pops up and you have a talk with a computer and you ask a question and it has from its database answers and it follows the logical sequence to be able to get you to a destination that you want? Wouldn't that be great, students? To have a higher education chat box. Well, that's already possible, okay? That's more analytical AI. And then human-inspired AI, based upon career service, this is a university example, able to identify emotions and improve interview techniques of students. So actually take a picture, a scan of Randy Waynick, and read Randy's emotion. And that's being developed. China's really into this, okay? Where they are looking at facial expressions and they're able then to predict attitudes and their state of affairs, okay? And you can think of how that could really be helpful. And there's others that are concerned that could be used to maybe be like Big Brother. We're going to have 1984 happening. But you get the idea of human-inspired AI? And the next step, where you have robo teachers animating a student group by acting as moderator and sparring partners. So you're actually interacting with a robot. And you don't need a robot able to humanize and read emotion and hear voice and see whether or not that person's mad or that person's happy, and interpret it accurately, and then have a conversation. So that's the humanized AI. Any thoughts or conversation around those points? Yes, Dave?
What happens when we get to that point where, like, obviously this would happen in the future where AI programs would be able to actually detect accurately emotions, but what about, like, just, like, being human? Because I remember hearing about how, when surgeons go into surgery, they still, like, even though they know what they're doing, they still have that one little touch of, like, thoughtfulness and emotion that goes into doing something that will cause them to either, like, make an irrational decision that will save someone or kind of follow protocol and possibly hurt someone. Like, what happens when we lose that?
I know.
As we're developing our AI programs.
Are you concerned about that?
You know what it makes me think of? The airplane, that the guy had all that experience, that United Airlines plane that landed in
Scully?
Scully.
Captain
yes,
Scully.
They made the movie out of it. And I think, if an AI was making that decision, they wouldn't have landed that, and all those people would be dead. But this guy was like, I can do this.
Notion of AI, but AI that's continuously adapting and learning would have been able to make that decision that Scully had made even better than he made it.
Maybe or maybe not. Maybe the odds were against it.
Right, but
We don't know.
that's the question.
Right.
Did you watch one of the NFL games this weekend where they showed the probability of that catch being made? They actually did they would say, what's the probability that this catch be made? That's a 12%, but was it made? It was. In those cases, the catch was made, but their analytics were saying that it was highly unlikely that it would be done. But was it done by a human in spite of the system's prediction? It was. AJ?
I wanted to go on the Scully note because there's actually a really real kind of similar ethical concern that, like, Tesla and a lot of companies are working on now, which is, like, this idea of, if a Tesla is driving your car and it can either hit, a family of 4 or kill you in the car, it might decide to kill you in the car because that's, the utilitarian decision calculus. And do you really want to have a car that will kill you if it determines that it's better off to save other people? And then there's this utilitarian aspect, and where it gets really scary is nuclear weapons, because they're actually using AI to determine nuclear weapons trajectories and response times and make it faster and faster. And we've already have scenarios from World War II where the only reason why we didn't have nuclear war with Russia was, like, a submarine captain, in Cuba deciding against rational interest to not push the button, and he'll go down before he starts nuclear war. So what happens when AI is making those decisions and it decides rationally, I'm going to preemptively strike? There's some really scary brain scenarios you can create when you put AI in the driver's seat and it doesn't have the same ethical concerns that humans do.
You can go down to the Embarcadero and see that Soviet sub. It's on display there, and see that whole story about how the Cuban Missile Crisis was averted by a human decision that went contrary to orders. Yeah. Other thoughts on this? Yes, sir.
I think the conversation is kind of leading to the singularity, which is where AI surpasses human ability. What happens to the chimpanzee when the human exists? What happens to the bacteria when bacteria becomes like a multi-celled organism? They're still there, but they're much less significant.
So does the created become the master of the creator?
Eventually.
So that the
slaves the creator.
So that is one doomsday scenario, that the computer AI gets so smart it can predestine let's use religious terms, predestine us to a destiny that we're not choosing.
Right.
Like CRISPR.
Like, can you imagine if a bad actor has control of AI, if they steer in the right direction to use CRISPR? Like, they're, like, I think now that they're even messing around with, like, there's only 4 elements in the genome, and now they're messing around with a 5th and a 6th by introducing hydrophobic hemoglobin around the, I don't know, I'm not a
You've lost me.
but so, I mean, like, can you imagine at the doomsday what happens?
Because we've already had a CRISPR incident, haven't we?
Right. But what if it's a negative?
Uh-huh.
It's meant to be positive.
Yeah.
So we think.
Yeah.
But
Has it been proven that he actually did that? He's been fired, I know, from his university.
Definitely edited them.
Yeah. But we haven't seen yeah.
The articles are saying that China is like currently overseeing the care of the children.
Ah.
Gone, but through the process of it to make sure that everything goes well, but they still haven't like released further information
Okay.
regarding the patients.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead, AJ. And then we're going to switch to how my faith
The one
plays
thing I
into
want to
this.
throw out real quick is when the AI theorists are looking at all the different scenarios, they've already come up with a lot of ideas in terms of what we can do to go for the best beneficial AI scenario versus the one that either destroys the world or takes over. And the really scary thing going on in AI, I didn't see in here that I thought was really important to bring up, was black box AI. The biggest problem right now and the biggest hubris in the AI world is the way that AI is learning at the highest levels, that machine learning is impossible to reverse engineer under the current way we're developing it. We have no idea how that AlphaGo player developed its skills. So once it hits the point where it gets smart enough, we aren't going to be able to go, hey, we know we can take this apart, we can say how it's thinking, so it's completely alien. So we're developing this AI without any way to code in ethics or even understand how it makes decisions. And that's what makes it so scary, because we're literally playing with a black box that we can shape and that comes up with answers, but they can't explain how it comes up with answers. And what happens when that black box is now way smarter than people and we have no idea how it thinks. That's the really scary proposition, is that we don't even understand how we're creating the own AI that we're creating right now.
Doesn't somebody own the black box? See, I think that's for me, is the bigger fear, is the Google, the Apple, the Amazon. What's to stop them from saying, hey, let's form a triad of, we'll own the world and everything in it. So I think who's watching the watchers, somebody's going to have the plug to the black box. I don't think the black box, at that point can manifest in a creature and walk and someone's going to own it. That's the scary part from the standpoint. And the prime examples, Google, Apple, Amazon.
Yep.
And Amazon's not just consumer. Amazon Web Services.
It's
breathing
enormous.
Amazon now. You don't even. It's everywhere. So that's the challenge. I think, or that is one of the challenges.
Yeah, when you think Amazon, you think selling products, but actually its most profitable is its web services. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just listening to what you guys were saying about the black box thing. To me, like, the fact that somebody could own that is like the only reassuring aspect of it, because if a human, like the computer can't actually, if we don't connect it to physical objects, it can't actually interact with like the real world unless a human like makes it able to like interact with it. So the point is that like it's still like a computer that's not able to like build itself like a machine and go out into the world unless like. So that's.
I'm sorry, I know we're going on, but I just want to correct that, because that's actually not necessarily true with some of the AI developing. I highly recommend a book. I think it's Our Final Solution that I was reading that changed my mindset on that. The AI of the future, they've already come up with a bunch of ways that even if you try to say have a firewall in super AI, when you have something that's 20, 30, 50,000 times smarter than a person, what if it, for example, created a way to send out sound waves, that turned into code? What if it we have no idea how it could break out, and the hubris that we could contain something that is, thousands of times smarter than us is like an ant trying to contain a lion. So there becomes this question where, what happens if it's so much smarter than us that there's no way to keep it under track? What if it could brainwash people or talk a human into letting it go, which is probably the easiest one of least resistance? There's so many ways that it can break out that we can even think of now, And the problem is not those ways, it's the ways that we can't think of because we're not 20,000 times smarter.
Mike, I'm going to lean on you a little bit since this is more your domain, but what's the profession thinking about the contention AJ is bringing up?
Wow, it's so broad. You know, I always look at this. See, and I was talking before we even started. AI was all the rage in the 70s.
Yes,
when
it's
I
not
got into
new.
this,
Uh-huh.
And it's still the rage. And so as we kind of expand this, you know, kind of like blowing up a balloon, the surface area of options increases, you know, exponentially to the amount of volume we're producing. So there's just so many different facets of this, and where it can go, man, if I knew that, I'd write a book and make a lot of money.
See, AI is not new, but what is new is our computing abilities and the data. Those two things have made it all possible. Data and computational ability. Yes?
I can't remember what company it was, but something that they had made a robotic or AI Twitter account, and then it was supposed to develop its own personality and make posts and stuff based on it. And then it turned racist very quickly, and they had to get rid of it. So I mean, even if you don't have your AI out in the real world, it can still have influence from society depending on the influences it has online, because the AI is still connected to the internet. I mean, our Google homes are Google. I mean, Google is a search engine.
If AI, go ahead.
In that same documentary, there's an octopus or a four-legged
Uh-huh.
and what they do is they disembody the robot to see how the robot will adapt to changes. And what they find later on down the line is that the robot starts learning the faces of the people disembodying the robot when they had never programmed it to do it. Like, there's just so many apps.
So that would support AJ, that it can become its own entity, its almost own human.
What AJ was saying is, like, if you have a black box thing and you have machine learning, if you take away a lot of data sets and you give it another machine learning, it can learn against itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't need, you know, and so.
Now, on a more operational day-to-day basis, though, if it's based upon data that it is interpreting, can't it make racist decisions based upon the human data that might have some racist undertones, and therefore post things that are racist because it is reflecting somebody's or a group of people's particular disposition?
And that's the thing too, when I think about what AJ was saying with the self-driving vehicles and having a utilitarian mindset and ethics system. It's not very good. Just not utilitarianism specifically, but depending on who's actually programming the ethics and stuff, it can have a very limited worldview or decision making, because maybe if you think purely utilitarian, then they would say, okay, kill the person in the car to save the two people. But then maybe if there are more ethics involved, then maybe it could weigh the chances of possibly, instead of killing anybody, maybe having injuries, so like crashing the car into something where all people could be alive, just injured, and like weighing all that stuff together.
So if it's being programmed, then the ethics of the programmer matters.
Yeah, because if it's being programmed into it, it matters what that programmer thinks.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
The thing is, nobody's programming.
Yeah.
It's programming itself.
It is not it is using data to program itself.
But where's it getting the data from?
From us, yeah. So it's not necessarily a programmer who is encoding an ethical norm. It is taking data, and it might be drawing conclusions from that data that would be racist because the data from the source has indications of racism. Does that make sense?
I think there was a test with parole boards that did just that, and they came out with racist decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was all based upon behaviors that's going into the input. So it was just extrapolating from that, and it made racist decisions about parole recommendations.
Okay.
I'm curious to know though, as we like kind of go back to the example of like crash the car and you die, or crash into people and they die. When do we get to the point though where that system is so perfected that those like decisions don't even have to be made because they don't exist? Like when they say like traffic is caused by human error because someone merges into another lane, thus creating this long like slinky chain of traffic stopping the traffic.
See you tonight, Murray.
When do we get to the point of like we don't even have to think about that anymore because it doesn't exist?
If all traffic was AI based, would we have that dilemma? No, could we take out the human error? Yeah, yes, sir.
My name's Darryl Falk. I'm a retired professor from here, but I'm very interested in faith and science issues. And one of my biggest concerns is AI. So I just appreciate the discussions that's coming in from the outside and feeling as though the concerns, especially with Front AJ, I think the name was, it just is so realistic. It's so something we all need to be concerned about as Christians. And so I just hope that the kind of discussion that I hear here today is not just something which just comes and goes, but it's something which, whether it be a course or whether it be a program, but we as Christians need to be really thinking seriously about the impact that all this can have in society, especially that's not far off. I mean, there's so many books that are talking about the kinds of things. Homo Deus is one of the best examples.
You need to read Homo Deus.
And the list just goes on.
And Sapiens before that.
So I just feel as though it's so important that this not just be kind of a one-time
Yeah.
conversation.
It's good. AI is going to be part of the conversation in Live United later in the semester. We're going to address it from more of a theological perspective. I think Mark Mann and probably Mark
Mann,
and Maddox.
Heather,
Yeah.
and Jimmy, sociology. I'm curious though, you've been thinking about this for a long time, and you've been thinking about marketing and AI from a Christian perspective, very intentional. From that Christian lens, can you tell us your wisdom, your thoughts, as you look through this, strictly as it relates to your Christianity and your own experience?
Yeah, if you look on the handout, you have Christian Ethics for Business, God's Character, a book that is very influential in my life by Alexander Hill called Just Business. And back in the 1960s, there were the Consumer Bill of Rights. The first 4 were planted, and since then we have aligned with some other Consumer Bill of Rights. Now, is the genie out of the bottle? It's close, but it's not there yet. And how to put, if the genie is out of the bottle and we don't know where it's going to take us, then get ready for the ride. I think there are going to be a lot of positives, there are going to be a lot of negatives. But if I'm in an organization, do I have a role to play to inform if we're going to use AI, how we're going to use AI, when we're not going to use AI, and what the purposes and the precepts of AI will be? Does my voice need to be present in that room? Do I need to be asking the tough questions? Not just about short-term transactional profitability. And there are strong, compelling, almost overwhelming forces sometimes, folks. Okay? AJ, we'll have you hold. There are strong, compelling, sometimes overwhelming sources. But if the people in the room are only driven by those strong, compelling, overwhelming sources, what am I talking about? Money. And is it long-term profitability or short-term profitability? Short-term. And did I start the premise about marketing not being about transactions but relationships, how the data supports that view of marketing is more advantageous? But when you're in the boardroom and you're working on your bonus and you got to hit your quota, and the analyst is saying you need to have a profitability of 7%, but you're only at 6% growth, by the way, okay? So you've grown 6%, but the analysts say 7%. So what's Wall Street Journal going to say about you if you come in at 6% instead of 7%? You did not fulfill your analyst expectations, so what's going to happen to your stock price? It's going to go down. Now, you're up 6%, so would most businesses like being up 6%? Not if the analysts say you should be up 7%, right? So there's all that reality. But I have been in those rooms where I've had to say, I don't say it like this, but I have to say, I don't think this is just. And increasingly, a society caring about justice and equality. Are companies being held accountable for stakeholders, not necessarily just stockholders? Is there increasing legitimacy for a voice to say, we need to make sure we're not perpetuating racist tendencies? That we're driven by love, that we're driven by justice, and that there are standards. There are still some rights and wrongs. God is a holy God. And that there are appropriate and inappropriate ways of behaving and acting. And so as a Christian, when I'm dealing with issues like this, not just AI, I think I have a role to raise the question. And a role to try to shape how it's used appropriately to provide the best mix of love, justice, and holiness, and to preserve those rights that consumers have, not undermine them, not to use it as a tool that benefits me only. It's not a self-centered tool. Is it a tool that's going to be helpful to the consumer and the stakeholders? Because my belief in Jesus Christ calls upon me to take action in the business world that might be contrary to culture. And it might be enormously frustrating. And in some days I might feel like I'm not going to win the argument. But should I be there to raise the argument? And should I be in positions that are informing how this is being used and how it's not being used? Now the big macro thing, I don't know where the future goes. But I trust Jesus. I trust in the end that God is in control. I trust the sovereignty of God. It's going to end somehow. I don't know if this AI is going to do it to us or nuclear weapons are going to do it to us. I mean, I lived through the 70s where Jesus was coming tomorrow, and when they had the movies that would scare you to the altar, and how we were really certain it was going to be the Russians who killed us, and how we looked at Revelations and we were able to predict that it was going to be the Russians, they're going to take over the Holy Land. And so who knows what it's going to be like? I don't know. But do I trust God is in control? Do I believe the sovereignty of God? But do I believe that I have to be active in trying to perpetuate God's kingdom while I'm here? Which means I'm always trying to argue for holiness, justice, and love as guiding principles. And do I win that argument sometime? Mm-hmm. And do I lose that argument sometimes? And sometimes do I leave organizations or don't work for organizations because we're incompatible? Mm-hmm. And do I have a lot of former students who are in the executive realms, even family members, who are raising these questions in organizations and trying to gear them, steer them to make decisions that are more in alignment with God's character of holiness, justice, and love? Yeah. And so in the micro world, I think I'm called upon to make a difference. I don't know if they're going to eat me someday or not, okay? But if they eat me, I do worry about justice. I worry about inequities. I worry about people being taken advantage. I worry very much about people with the skill set that puts them on the outside. I worry about power, the big companies having so much power over the data that they dictate. I am very concerned about whether or not the algorithms about me predict in my best interest or predict in somebody else's best interest. Whether or not it gives me options or whether or not it limits the options, like what has happened with political news, where we become less aware of the breadth of arguments because we're being fed information that only aligns with what has been determined is our position. That's a scary thing for me. That undermines our ability to empathize and to negotiate and to compromise. And I'm supposed to be done by now. Let the conversation continue. Okay.
Let's give him a hand.